to look at these or detect these factors in the archaeological record. Obviously, it brings literacy, it brings writing systems. Also, maybe more important for art historians or archaeologists, it brings in a new art, architecture, a whole symbolic and iconographic vocabulary that we can trace and identify. It also brings in new philosophical, moral, and ethical codes, new politics, perhaps, the Dhamma-Raja concept, the king that rules by Dhamma, kings or leaders equating themselves with bodhisattvas. The king of Thailand today is still considered by many to be a bodhisattva, so we see this continuing to the present day. It brings in new technologies as well, which is also very important. This is something that archaeologists will try and identify in terms of, obviously, architecture. Urban planning is another interesting change that takes place. The society, the society also has to give something back. And in order to do this, it needs to be producing a surplus. And this is very important, again, for trying to trace where Buddhism would be able to move into. If a society cannot produce a surplus, it cannot support Buddhism. So again, this is one thing we can try and look for archaeologically. Society has to provide sustenance for the Sangha. It also has to provide a lot of resources in terms of raw material. If you want to make bronze Buddha images, it's not just the bronze you need to provide, it's wood as well to cast these images. So there's a lot of investment that is needed in order to support and maintain Buddhism. That said, the ruling class can gain new ways to legitimize itself if it aligns itself closely with the Sangha. But in turn, society gets maybe new ways of salvation, new ethical and moral codes. I also want to try and contrast two practices within Buddhism that I argue I can trace in the archaeological record. The main form which we see today throughout Thailand, at least, is urban monasticism, which differs from maybe the early record in India, where monasteries were located outside of communities. By placing themselves within the urban fabric of a society, the monks they avail of much more potential donations and so forth. So again, we need to look at pre-existing urban areas with sufficient populations to support it. And at the period I'm looking at, this is usually based along the moated sites along the river systems. Okay, I'll skip this. Again, just a modern analogy. We get both lay and royal patronage, both all throughout Buddhism's history, and this is again, an important factor. The other aspect I will argue today I've detected in the archaeological record is the practice of forest monks. They were much less dependent on society. They could withdraw from it. They didn't need a lot of resources. And because of that, they could spread to areas which were much less densely occupied. And usually these were forests or mountaintops and hillsides. So you see a slightly different pattern of where this takes place. This is just a textual reference to traditions of forest monks. And this is an example from Thailand, actually, from 2007, of a modern forest monk in brown, actually. The individual to the left, is actually a Brahmin who's conducting the ritual. Okay, so the first thing I did was I plotted all the known moated sites in the Mon and Chi river systems. And what you see quite clearly is that they follow the course of the river systems. as we'd suspect, obviously you always need a fresh or a constant water supply, both for drinking and irrigation. So that is one thing that, by identifying where the settlements are, we can then start to look for where Buddhism might also take hold. And then I've been working on looking at more topographic maps to try and narrow this down somewhat. So this is one of the main moated sites within northeast Thailand. It's called Muang Pha Ded. And it definitely looks like one of the main centers of Buddhism during this period. This is an in situ Sema stone. It's the largest site in the Chi River system. It's about 170 hectares. It's got the most substantial architectural and artistic remains in the region. And it's also located at a key location on the river system. So this is a close-up map, and it's the site here highlighted. This is an aerial view of it. And one thing that's quite interesting, which happens in this period, is, again, Buddhism seems to also influence urban planning. And you can see on this map, if I just do like this, the site, the moat gets ringed by stupas. So we have a stupa here, 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 and around. And we also get this in Sikasetra in Myanmar, where there's a stupa placed at each of the cardinal points. So this seems to be one thing that that begins to occur in this period, where Buddhism, in a way, seems to encapsulate the settlement that it is inhabiting. This is just a detail of it. And then what I did after that is I mapped the location of Sema stones. I recorded over 110 sites and over 1,200 Sema. So the figures are quite important. It shows the intensity and extensiveness of Buddhism in this period. Before my research, people had sort of looked at northeast Thailand and Laos as a sort of backwater where there wasn't really much going on. My research tended to show the opposite. Again, if you look at the river systems, you see that the Sema are they're very clearly based along the river systems, particularly the Mun and the Chi. Once you get up into the Mekong, a little less so, but maybe more off on the tributaries here and here. I also tried to group the Sema into clusters to see if I could identify either different traditions or different maybe different centers of Buddhism within the region. This is just an example of some Sema that are still in situ today. This is another example. There's one, two. This is like just a fragment. This is just north of Vientiane, actually about 20 kilometers north. Another method I used was to plot where the narrative art is. A lot of the previous literature on Sema stones had focused almost exclusively on narrative art that was carved on them. Kind of understandable. It's quite, some of it's very beautiful. It's also, it's in one way of approaching what Buddhism, or what type of Buddhism was being practiced and so forth in the region, but it tended to skew the picture a bit and suggested that all Sema had narrative art, which depicted life of the Buddha or past lives. Or past lives of the Buddha, Jataka tales. But by plotting where the narrative art was, it became pretty apparent that there's only a few centers within northeast Thailand that mainly produces it. And again, it's Muang Pha Ded was the main site. It had 55 Sema with narrative art. Another important site is Ban Long Han. And then there was a cluster down here as well and a cluster up here. So again, this is another method I was trying to use to try and pinpoint exactly where the Buddhism in this period was developing more, again, to try and develop, trying to identify centers or the main locations for it. statistically, it's about, I think the ratio of 1 to 10, only about 1 out of every 10 same has narrative art on it. These are 2 examples. This one has been identified as possibly the Buddha preaching to King Bimpasara, who was donated one of the first kings to donate a monastery to the Buddha. It's also important from a from a textual point of view. It sort of establishes the tradition of royalty making donations to the Buddha or the monkhood. This one has been identified as the grass cutter handing grass to the Buddha before he's going to meditate under the Bodhi tree. Presumably this is the Bodhi tree. There's quite a few other examples. These are 2 of the Jatakas that have been depicted. This one is the Vidahora Pandita Jataka. This is the Bodhisattva Vidura. So that's the Buddha in a previous life. This is one of the 10 great Jatakas, so the last 10 reincarnations before he becomes a Buddha. The story here is that a yaksha general, a sort of demon general, is sent to kill him, and they're on a mountaintop, and he's about to throw the Bodhisattva off the mountain when the Bodhisattva persuades him to first preach the Dharma to him. And upon doing that, the yaksha general immediately converts, becomes a Buddhist, and spares the Bodhisattva. This is a Sama Jataka. It's another very common Jataka to be depicted in Southeast Asia. At most temple murals you go today, you'll see it. This time the Bodhisattva is living in the forest. He's supporting his parents, and he gets shot by a hunter. And you can see the bow and then the arrow going through the Bodhisattva. But we also get a lot of other motifs on Sema. We get stupa motifs, also these sort of stupa or kumbha pot motifs, and we get Dharma Chakra as well, the wheel of the law. This is an example of one of the inscriptions that we get. This one, the donor requests to be reborn in the time of Sri Arya Maitreya, the Bodhisattva Maitreya. This is quite a common feature of these inscriptions. They don't really say much more than asking to be reborn, or they can be Ye Dharma inscriptions as well, which is just the Buddhist credo. And so then, once I had mapped where the moated sites were and also Sema stones, I superimposed one map on top of the other, again to try and get a better idea. And then I added on the mountaintop sites as well. So this map is basically a complete map of all the evidence of Buddhism from 6th to 10th century that I've recorded in the northeast of Thailand and Central Laos. Just for explanation, the blue squares are the moated sites themselves, and then the orange circles are where Sema are found. The stars are the mountaintop sites, so you can see them here. So again, what we quite clearly see is that Buddhism is extremely prevalent along the Chi River system. Most of the moated sites have evidence for Buddhism. We get a more sporadic picture in the lower, in the Mun. I think part of this is because we have the Chenla kingdom here, which is the forerunner to Angkor, and it's pushing up into this region in this period as well. So we also get a lot of Hindu temples in this region. So this is a more mixed area. But definitely in the Chi River, we see extremely strong presence of Buddhism. And then all the way up the Mekong, we get sites, and then we get another cluster up here in what is today Vientiane province of Laos. So just quickly turning to the mountaintop sites, they're quite interesting. I think what's happening here is they're either meditational retreats for monks. Monks are meant to, during the rainy season every year, they're supposed to go and retreat and meditate for 3 months. So we could be seeing a forest monk tradition here. They could also be pilgrimage sites, or they could function as both. The two sites I'd like to focus on are this is where's it going? This is Mung Fa Dead, and then this is the two mountaintop sites are here. And I think what's happening here is that these sites are connected to Mung Fa Dead, either as I said, as pilgrimage sites or locations for meditation. This is just a satellite image. And this is one of the Buddhas in Mahaparinirvana that's been carved into the rock face. The other side here, Pukau Putanamit. Again, it's on a rock outcrop, and this is it today. Again, it's a sleeping Buddha Mahaparinirvana. And then we get these three sites up here as well. We get Buddha images carved into the natural rock. What's interesting about this site, Pupabat, is that we have what seem to be pre-Buddhist rock shelters that then get, I would say, Buddhicized, for lack of a better term. These are Sema stones that have been placed around it. So it's very interesting. This is, again, the same site. And this is a natural rock formation, but they've added little sort of brick here. So it looks like it'd be a monastic cell for meditation and so forth. This is the site in Vientiane province. You can see a Buddha image carved, again, in the rock. Again, some more Buddha images carved under these naturally occurring rock formations. And then this is the view you get from the top of the hill. And this piece of wood here there's still a monk that is based at this site, and he basically sits here every morning and meditates. So we could quite easily imagine that this was exactly what was going on the 7th, 8th century as well, and this is probably precisely why they chose sites like this. The last one is Van Sang in Vientiane province. It's just about 15 kilometers north of the one I just shown. Again, we get Buddha images carved into the rock face. So how did Buddhism move in? I think it's very clear that it moved along the river systems. I think it's multi-directional as well. It's probably coming in from central Thailand, and then spreading along the Chi River system, and then maybe up the Mekong, and then to a lesser extent along the Mun. It's very clear that the Chi River system in this time is the main area for Buddhism. Maybe we could refer to it as a Buddhist civilization along the river. That's some of the main conclusions I was able to draw from my research. How am I doing for time? Have I got 10 minutes? Yeah. All right. The other interesting aspect that I